Hello and welcome to my weekly wrap up. I have a snowy mug, which is super appropriate because it's been a snowy week. Hello, as you can see, it's snowing. Oh, amazing. I know I was complaining in my video earlier this week about how, they always forecast snow in the winter here and then it never happens. Well, this time, it's actually snowing. And in the end, this little snowstorm moving through it's lasting longer than they said it would, and I think it's going to end up with a little bit more snow than they originally said, so I am a happy camper. And so I am filming out here really quick, so I'm not going to be really long, but I did want to say I finished late last night. I won't say how late, it's probably early this morning. I finished reading Veiled in Smoke by Jocelyn, which I am reading with the protagonist Pub in her book club on the app Fable, which you should check out. All kinds of book clubs and buddy reading there. It's a great app for reading in community with other people. Anyway, quite a few of us are on there talking about this book and our reactions to it and etc. It was a lot heavier than I had anticipated. It is not, it's historical fiction set in Chicago during the fire of 1871. Very well researched historically. I learned a lot about the fire and Chicago's response to it and the things that happened in the aftermath of the fire. Very interesting. But it's about way more than that. It's about a family and the struggles they were already going through following the Civil War. The father has PTSD, although back then they called it soldier's heart, and just all of his struggles inherent in that. He ends up in an asylum briefly, which was really, really hard to read about. And along the way, one of the sisters, she falls in love. Actually, they both end up falling in love. So there's a thread of romance in their stories. It's not a romance novel, but there's a thread of romance in both of their stories. I don't want to spoil anything, but one of the romances ends happily and the other one not so much. And so there is a lot going on. The older girl in the story, she ends up burning her hands in the course of the fire, and so she has a lot. She's an artist, so she has a lot to deal with and work through that. She has to kind of learn how to learn again how to paint and produce her art. So there's a lot going on in the story. There's a lot of heaviness, but it all comes together nicely in the end. It's ultimately very redemptive. There are a lot of lessons learned about family and about the ways we handle difficulty in our family relationships and closing each other off or opening up to each other. And mental health is a big issue here in this story, and good and bad ways to handle that in someone that you love. And anyway, overall, a really good story. I enjoyed it. I have not, as I am filming this, I've not put my review on Goodreads or Storygraph yet. I will. I probably will give it, I guess, 4 stars. I think Jocelyn Green's narrative style, I've read a few of her books that I really enjoyed, but the last couple of books I've read by her, one of them I ended up DNFing because I just couldn't get into it, and I felt like the narrative style was just too much telling and not enough showing. And I felt a little bit of that with this one too, not to the extent I did. This one had a lot more going on, a lot more happening, and it was a lot more interesting than the one that I DNF'd, but it's still a little bit, the narrative style is not my favorite. A little bit too much, not quite this elementary, but a little bit much. She did this and then she did that kind of thing, which is not super appealing to me. But generally speaking, I really love the story, and I enjoyed reading it with the other ladies and talking about it. Looking forward to more discussion as they are wrapping up and finishing it. So that is my read number 1 for this week. Next, I'm going to start Hound of the Baskerbilles, and I have a couple of other books lined up that also fit in with Oshina's and Holly's Reading in the New Year challenge. In the categories there, Hound of the Baskervilles ticks off like 5 of the boxes. It's less than 250 pages. It's an author I've never read before. I don't think. I may have. I don't know. So, new to me author, part of a series. And for Chantel Reads All Day, Read Your Shelf Challenge, it has it all going to cover. So, it knocks off a bunch of boxes, so I'm going to get started with that. And then there are some others on there that I will probably get to at some point this week as well, at least start them. So, anyway, my week is off to a great start because snow. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
This year I made a goal to make sourdough once a month, and a day off, not to mention a snowy day, was the perfect day to do it. I used to make sourdough a long time ago, but ran out of time, but I'm going to make time for it this year.
And finally, I had an honest to goodness snow day today. Yesterday, when it snowed, it was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and so I was already off of work, but today we didn't get any more snow today, but we got more snow overnight. So a lot of roads aren't clear, etc. So snow day. And my plans for today were inspired by Sherlock Holmes. When I was reading last night in this part of the story, the case that he was being given was located in Devonshire, a ways away from where he was in London. So he was like mentally like looking at maps, thinking through the evidence and whatever. But Watson says, so Sherlock Holmes says to Dr. Watson, "I have been to Devonshire." "In spirit?" Watson says. And he says, "Exactly. My body has remained in this armchair and has, I regret to observe, consumed in my absence 2 large pots of coffee and an incredible amount of tobacco." I did not consume any tobacco whatsoever. I didn't even inhale any. However, I did consume multiple cups of coffee. I did pour over, so I didn't make any pots, so I don't know. And I made 1 espresso, which I have right here, cappuccino. So I have been sitting in this armchair consuming coffee and reading for most of the day, except for when you may have seen my Instagram story. I was working on a puzzle, which ended up being a very super easy puzzle that we're probably going to finish today. So I need to get me a new puzzle book. It's a little more complicated that I can work on little bits throughout the winter, which is a really good time for building puzzles, in my opinion. Anyway, so today I had adequate time to finish reading Hound of the Baskerbilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This was my January read for the Read Your Shelf Challenge by Chantel, and it was my first that I know of book by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and my first Sherlock Holmes book, and I really enjoyed it. This is the second detective mystery book that I have read in this month. What is going on? 2024. New year, new me, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, it was interesting reading an Agatha Christie and a Sherlock Holmes back to back to compare and contrast the two detectives. And they're very different. They're about as different as night and day could be. Hercule Poirot being the day and Sherlock Holmes definitely being the night. Obviously, both of them, designed to be brilliant, intelligent people who can, analyze clues and come to conclusions and solve mysteries, etc. That being the unifying factor there, but the difference being their attitude, the way they interact with other people, etc. Now, Sherlock Holmes being a gentleman, by gentleman I mean like, a man of the gentleman class. I don't know how else to say it. He is typically, he behaves in that way like a gentleman would. Very civil and polite to people, especially of his own class, etc. But not as much nearly of a caring person as Hercule Poirot, and insightful into human character, but not as interested in the actual people. It seemed. I've only read one of him and two about Hercule Poirot, so not necessarily qualified to make these judgments of them, but that's what it seemed like to me. Even more interestingly, I kept highlighting the ways that Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson interacted with each other, and it was kind of interesting. It seems to be a slightly dysfunctional relationship there, where Sherlock Holmes is very often condescending, and Dr. Watson just takes it most of the time because he really admires Sherlock Holmes, but also there's an underlying current of resentment, or I don't know, something underlying there, just under the surface that he usually manages to smooth over. But definitely an interesting dynamic there. They're not necessarily, they don't necessarily come across to me as, you know, best friends. They work together, partners, and it works because the one is more or less subservient to the other, but they're not on equal footing by any means. Anyway, I just found that was interesting. This story was very interesting. The mystery was interesting. I was a little bit curious how they were going to pull it off. There was a lot of talk throughout the story of it being, you know, seeming to be a supernatural thing. So, kind of like a Jamie Jo Wright book, you know, it's like, okay, I know it's not going to be supernatural, but how are they going to explain this? And so it was interesting. Believable as far as I know, maybe not 100%, but I don't know enough about the situation in question to be able to make a well-informed judgment call on that, but seems plausible. And the murderer, I guess, both surprised me and didn't. Parts of it surprised me and parts of it did not. The conclusion, how everything wrapped up together. But one thing that I observed about this was that the Moor was almost like a character in this story and was used very effectively to create kind of like a Gothic setting, which I wasn't really expecting. And it had a lot of the elements of a Gothic story, you know, this old ancient family home that was like you know, medieval style ancient family home with an ancient story of, you know, a curse on the family. And then there are innocent women in the story whose virtue is at stake, etc. And there are seemingly otherworldly creatures about, etc. So lots of Gothic elements, which was a fun, unexpected surprise that I enjoyed. So overall, I really enjoyed my first foray into Sherlock Holmes. I definitely prefer Hercule Poirot as a detective, as a person, if we're gonna talk about that. But he was definitely interesting and amusing, and kind of his sardonic personality has its own sort of unique charm, if you will. So anyways, finished this. Now I'm reading just a little bit of snow day fluff before I pick up maybe Hope Between the Pages, that's what it's called, by Pepper Basham, for the Reading in the New Year challenge, or perhaps And the Dead Shall Rise, which is a nonfiction book, or maybe something else entirely, depending on what mood strikes me. I have a 2-hour delay tomorrow, so doesn't necessarily give me extra reading time, probably more like extra sleeping time, extra little bit relaxing so I don't have to rush out the door in the morning. So anyway, see you next time. I have a little mini book haul to show you. With my Christmas money, I did something I had never done before, and I pre-ordered a book. And not only did I pre-order a book, I pre-ordered 2 books. And the second one came in today, so I will show both of them. The first is The Seamstress of Acadie by Laura France. And isn't that a beautiful cover? and it came with a nameplate, which I had trouble finding where to put it because the pages in the front there wasn't a good place. So I ended up putting it in the back with the with Laura Francis' signature on there, and it came with the bookmark also. So anyways, I'm looking forward to reading this. And then the other one is the Divine Proverb of Streusel by Sarah Brunsfeld. And I've heard really good things. Actually, I've heard really good things about both of these. I was most interested in looking at the reviews of this one because Laura France is an established author, and I know I have enjoyed almost everything that I have read by her. And I've read almost all of her books. So I know that I will more than likely really enjoy this book. So I didn't have to wonder about that. But this one, Sarah Brunsfeld, her debut book last year was The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kipp, and it was so good. But sometimes a debut author can be like that, you know, like they can have a really amazing first novel because it's something that they just really needed to say, and they put all of their effort and talent into it. But then with the demands and pressures of publishing on a schedule after that, the other subsequent novels can fall flat. So I was really looking at the people's reviews, the ARC readers and everything for this book before it officially came out. And so far it has gotten really rave reviews, and everything I've read has been very positive. So I am looking forward to this one. But it's a little bit like, I want to savor the anticipation a little bit. I don't necessarily want to dive in because then what if I'm disappointed because I think they'll both be really good, and then what if I don't like them? The dilemmas. So, will I read them? Well, I mean, I'll read them eventually, but will I read them sooner or later? Have you read either one? Let me know.
Hello! I don't really have any reading updates to share right now, but I just wanted to show you we're getting more snow. This work week has been bookended with snow. Snowstorm on Monday, snowstorm on Friday. This snowstorm being significantly more than they expected and lasting longer than they predicted. So, yay, it's been a snowy week and I'm loving it. Have had 2 snow days this week and a holiday and a 2-hour delay. So I have been to work 1.5 days this week and it's been amazing. Anyway, so having a lovely time enjoying the snow. Did a little sourdough bread baking. My husband and I went last night and had a little date night before the snow came, the second round of snow. Had a little date night to Barnes & Noble, and I bought myself a puzzle. We went there specifically for that, and little did I know that their puzzles were buy one get one half off for January. So I had good timing. I had some more Christmas money to spend, so we found a couple puzzles and we are working on it already. I will show you some clips of that and all of our summer winter fun that we have been having this week. It's been such a glorious week. Next week is supposed to be rainy and on the warmer side as far as winter goes, so boo. I'm just gonna enjoy the winter snow as much as I can and share a little bit of it with you. So I hope you are enjoying your week and your weather wherever you are, whatever weather you're having. Also, I just wanted to show you the little snow bear my son made. He's gotten kind of snowed over, so he's losing a little bit of his sculpting, but this is our snow bear. He's so cute. Ooh, I like the London one. These are cool too. Show me what it is. Dracula, Agatha Christie, Frankenstein, Virginia Woolf. That is very cool. I found it! The one I want. The World of Jane Austen. That's cool. Animal Tales.
Favorite winter activity, especially for a snow day. And this, I've been wanting to do this puzzle for a long time, ever since I did the Dickens one.
There's another corner.
It has scenes and characters from the Austen novels kind of sprinkled throughout. It's fun to find them.
For my final update this week, I want to talk about Hope Between the Pages, which I finished yesterday. Yes, yesterday. This was for the Reading in the New Year Challenge by Oshina and Holly, and it fit the prompts to read a book that you didn't pay for. I think it fit a couple of others in the challenge, but I forget now what they were. But anyways, that was the reason why I read this one. My sister had lent me this one, and now I only have one more book left in the stack of books I borrowed from my sister a few months ago, so it's time to go visit the sister library again. Anyway, I finished this one yesterday. What I really appreciate about Pepper Basham is that she is able to move effortlessly between contemporary rom-com and historical fiction. And this one is in the historical fiction category. It's more of a drama, romance, family drama kind of story than her rom-com type stories, which I have been enjoying her current series. Well, I've only read the first one, Authentically Izzy, and I want to read the other two in this series. But there's just, funny rom-com epistolary type novels. This is very different. It's a dual timeline, and the current contemporary generation of the story, they are hunting for the missing deed to the bookshop that they own in the Biltmore Village, which is outside the Biltmore Castle in Asheville, North Carolina, which my husband and I went to on our honeymoon, and then most recently for our 15th anniversary, I think, yes. Anyway, so we have fond memories of Biltmore, and I love the history, the Vanderbilts and that whole area there. And I love the super cute little Biltmore Village. Love it. So anyway, this is set in a bookstore, a fictional bookstore in Biltmore Village, and the current generation of the family that owns the bookstore is hunting for the deed, the missing deed. But in the process, they discover a lot of things about the great-grandmother who founded the bookstore, and they learn a lot about her life story that they had not yet discovered. And of course, that's the historic timeline, is their great-grandmother's story. And usually in a dual timeline, I much prefer the historic timeline. I almost always do. Shockingly with this one, I much preferred the contemporary one. And honestly, as far as I'm concerned, I would have been content instead of flipping back every chapter between the two timelines. I would have been content with mostly sticking with the contemporary timeline and just a few flashbacks, describing what was happening in the historic timeline. Although the two timelines were woven together very well, she did do an excellent job of interweaving those stories and connecting them. So it probably wouldn't be as complete of a novel without that complete historic timeline. So I just didn't love their story as much. there were a lot of fairy tale elements to the story, not in a fantastical, unrealistic, magical sort of way, but just taking different ideas and tropes from fairy tales, and a lot of discussion of you know, the wonder and imagination of fairy tales and reading fairy tales and all of that kind of stuff, which I really enjoyed. I love that aspect of things. I really like that. As the title of my channel is In Search of Wonder, that's exactly the sort of thing, like a theme of my own reading and pursuit in life. You know, I'm always trying to open my eyes to things that are wonderful, things that things of the imagination, things that give beauty and hope and purpose to life, not just your everyday, mundane, boring, you know, blah 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 sort of stuff. The things that are maybe not so practical, but more important. Anyway, there was a lot of discussion of that in the story, and I liked that aspect of it. I also liked that the two main romances, the threads, the historic one and the contemporary one, they were kind of inspired by fairy tales. There's hints of Cinderella and hints of Beauty and the Beast, and that was fun. So there was a lot of stuff that I enjoyed. Yeah, the main thing, I guess, was I didn't love the historic timeline, mostly because I did not feel as much connected with those characters. Like, I don't know, they just seemed a little more distant, and it may have been me, but it may have been the way that story was narrated. I'm not sure. I just couldn't really get invested in them. Plus, I felt like their story was a little bit unrealistic. I mean, it is supposed to echo a fairy tale, but it just wasn't convincing for me personally. I really liked the hero of that story. He was a really neat character, very interesting person, very humorous. So anyway, this was a good story. I'm glad I read it. And I'll probably give it like 3.5 stars overall, which means, you know, it was good. I recommend it, especially if you like historical fiction and dual timelines. And probably won't read it again, but I enjoyed it, and I will read more by Pepper Basham. Before I sign off and wrap up this video for the week, I wanted to give an update on what I am currently in the process of reading and what I plan to pick up next week when I'm finished with these. First of all, I am working on A Girl in Winter by Philip Larkin, which is for the What the Dickens Facebook book club that I am in. I had never read anything by this author. He is an English poet, and he wrote a couple of novels. This is his second one. It is set in London during World War II, which was very recent history at the time that he wrote the novel. It was published in 1947. There's an immediacy to the setting, but there's also, because everyone in his audience at the time that he wrote it, they lived it, you know, so he didn't have to explain anything, you know, of the historical setting or whatever. Plus, that's not his narrative style. You're just kind of like dumped into that setting, and it's not like there's a lot of talk about the war. It's just, it's there, and it's affecting their daily life. So anyway, it's very interesting in that sense, like as reading it now and looking back at that time, kind of being just dumped in that setting. Anyway, the girl in this story, it's never made very clear. It's never spelled out exactly where she's from, but it's implied that she is a refugee from Germany, probably a Jew. So that adds an interesting element to the story as well. And as it says, it's set in wintertime. The middle part of the book is a flashback to a period earlier in her life, which was a summertime. So there's like winter, summer, and then winter again. The author, as I said, he was a poet. So the very first chapter is really, it's kind of like a prologue, or like a prologue. And it kind of sets the scene for the story. It's not really part of the actual narrative of the story yet, but it gives you a sense of of his writing style and his poetic approach. So I'll read this. It's a short little chapter. There had been no more snow during the night, but because the frost continued so that the drifts lay where they had fallen, people told each other there was more to come. And when it grew lighter, it seemed that they were right, for there was no sun, only one vast shell of cloud over the fields and woods. In contrast to the snow, the sky looked brown. Indeed, without the snow, the morning would have resembled a January nightfall, for what light there was seemed to rise up from it. It lay in ditches and in hollows in the fields where only birds walked. In some lanes, the wind had swept it up faultlessly to the very tops of the hedges. Villages were cut off until gangs of men could clear a passage on the roads. The laborers could not go out to work, and on the aerodromes near these villages, all flying remained cancelled. People who lay ill in bed could see the shine off the ceilings of their rooms, and a puppy confronted with it for the first time howled and crept under the water butt. The outhouses were roughly powdered down the windward side. The fences were half submerged like breakwaters. The whole landscape was so white and still, it might have been a formal painting. People were unwilling to get up. To look at the snow too long had a hypnotic effect, drawing away all power of concentration, and the cold seemed to cramp the bones, making work harder and unpleasant. Nevertheless, the candles had to be lit, and the ice in the jugs smashed, and the milk unfrozen. The men had to be given their breakfasts and got off to work in the yards. Life had to be carried on, in no matter what circumscribed way. Even though one went no further than the window seat, there was plenty to be done indoors, saved for such a time as this. But through cuttings and along embankments ran the railway lines, and although they were empty, they led on northwards and southwards till they began to join, passing factories that had worked all night, and the backs of houses where light showed round the curtains, reaching the cities where the snow was disregarded, and which the frost could only besiege for a few days bitterly. And then that brings us into the city of London, where the story is set. So that's what I'm working on. I'm about a third of the way through. So I actually have a week and a half to read that one before the discussion time is due. But I'm sure I'll be finished with it before then. And then we have And the Dead Shall Rise, which is about a crime that took place in 1913, I think, in Georgia. And the aftermath and the Jewish man who was accused of the crime, and still nobody's quite sure if he did it or not. So this is an investigation, like a journalistic type investigation of the crime and the man who was accused of it, and an examination of all of the evidence. I am only like 3 or 4 pages in, so haven't gotten very far, but I've picked this up. This also ticks off a couple boxes for the Reading in the New Year challenge, but it was also on my nonfiction TBR for January. So then after that, I'm not sure what I will want to read. Probably The Midnight Library or Gilead or Keeper of Lost Things. Some other fiction book from my list of fiction for my January TBR. I'll just, maybe pick a number or something. Pick one of them, because they're kind of like all of equal interest level to me, so I don't know which one I want to read more than the other. None of them are standing out. If you have a suggestion, let me know. If you've read any, if you think I would like one better than the other. The Midnight Library, Keeper of Lost Things, Gilead, and Ragtime. Those are the 4 that I would pick from. So that has been my week of reading, and looking forward to next week, the last full week of January. We'll see what all I can finish. I read a lot this month already because Snow Week, that was an extra special blessing, by the way. So much to be thankful for. I worked a day and a half this past week, so I've been just relaxing at home, doing just enough cleaning to keep the house from being horribly dirty, and been doing plenty of reading and just other fun, relaxing indoor activities, puzzles, baking. It's really been marvelous. So I'm determined that next week, even though it will be back to the rainy, gloomy version of January, and my husband is going out of town for a few days, I'm determined that I'm going to be grateful because I had this wonderful, blessed, relaxing week in the middle of a month that can traditionally be very difficult to get through as a teacher. So I will not complain. I'm resolved to be grateful because I had a wonderful week. So here's to next week, and I hope you all have had a fantastic week also, and that your coming week is also wonderful. Let me know in the comments what you've been up to, if you got snow, if you enjoyed the snow, and what you've been doing to keep yourself busy and what you've been reading. It's so fun to chat with you in the comments, and I will see you next time.